You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Denny Barlow, the event coordinator for the Mayor's Cup. Please come out and support your local mayors as they race for hunger in stock cars provided by Raceway Park. All proceeds go to your local food shelves. Family fun and entertainment for everybody. See you at the races.
Come watch the Minnesota North Stars battle it out on the raceway.
Ladies and gentlemen, we need your help to come out and support the local food shelves.
Come on, support your local mayor. Watch them race.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome into our live show here for this Sunday. Great day out there. And obviously, as you can see, we've got a very special guest joining us here for today. Denny joining us here as host of the show and host of the Sunday show. And joining us to discuss his career as well as his work with the Minnesota Alumni Association is none other than Jack Carlson. Jack, so glad to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
We're doing fine. Yeah, thanks for having me on, fellas. I appreciate that.
Our pleasure.
Denny, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, before we get to Jack, there's a few things I get off my mind. And one is everybody's so concerned about how we're going to watch our Wild this year. Well, I'm going to give you a website that you can go to, sign up, and you can watch the home games, the away games. You can pick any game you want. It's called NHL 66. It's out of Sweden. And you do need a VPN number because the NHL, if they track you down, they'll cut it off. That's why there's a VPN number, so they can't track you. But it's only like $10 a month, and you can watch any game you want. I highly recommend it. I've been watching them for a couple of years. Secondly, talking about the draft. Now, you know, it's a lot of pomp, and you know, they pump all these guys up. But I want you guys to realize, and ladies, that out of the 32 picks, if 12 or 13 players actually make the teams, that's a good year. Not everybody's going to be a Hall of Famer or all-star like they're talking about every player. And just realize how good Judd Brackett is at picking, because he just continually hits it on the head in this draft. When he traded up to get Zeev, that may be the second best trade in Wild history. We'll see as time goes, but I think out of all the players that were drafted in the first round, Zeev is probably the most likeliest to play right after school, much like the Brock Faber deal. And so, you know, I give my hats off to Judd. He continually keeps hitting it. And that's all I got to say about that. Now it's time to talk to Mr. Carlson about his life and career as a hockey player and what's going on. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Well, thanks, Denny. Yep, things are going pretty well on this side of the ocean, let's sort of speak. So it's been going pretty good.
Good. What I would like is for you to start out how you got into hockey, your whole career through. As much as you want to talk, we have no time limit here.
Okay.
You got something to say, we want to hear it.
All right.
As our fans do. Okay, it's your show.
Yep. So I grew up in northern Minnesota, Virginia, a little small town, probably 60 miles west of Duluth, and played high school hockey up there. I had two other brothers, my brother Jeff and brother Steve. We're all 1 year apart, so we were aligned on high school. And then, graduated from high school. Again, my dad worked in the iron ore mines, so money was not available to go to college, to pay for college. We did get, my brother Jeff and I did get a chance to go to play in St. Scholastica, and they ended up telling us when we went and tried out and talked to them that they would give us a half of a scholarship if we made the team. And I thought, if we made the team, I told my brother Jeff, we should just go kick the crap out of everybody, and we'd make the team because we'd be the only ones left. You know. so we ended up coming down to Minneapolis and played for the junior Bruins over at the Golden Valley Ice Center. Then my brother Steve graduated. This was probably in the early 70s, 73, 70, 74, 75. And we ended up going up to funny story. We went in the United States Hockey League. There was a team down in it's not the USHL now, but it was more of a men's league, and there was probably 8 or 9 teams. And we went down to Waterloo and tried out as a line. And it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday deal, and we scrimmaged. And out of the 11 goals that were scored, we got 8 of them. We got this made. They called us in and said, "Yeah, we don't think you're going to be good enough to play in this league." And we went, "What? What? Are you kidding me?" So that year, we found out that Marquette, Michigan was looking for players. So we went up there, and they took us. Same league, same teams, everything. And I ended up scoring 42 goals that year and was named MVP of the league. My brother Steve and I were first-team All-Stars, and my brother Jeff was second-team All-Star. But we weren't good enough to play in the league. So then I got a hold of a guy. I saw him at a junior tryout here, and his name was Jack Barzy. I said, "Jack, this has been bothering me for 20 years. We weren't good enough?" He goes, "Jack, we wanted to take you, but we had all these guys that were living in town that were on the team, and we couldn't put you on it because we would have had to have cut them." I thought, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." So
wow.
And then going forward, then the Fighting Saints were over in St. Paul, which was the old World Hockey Association, WHA, and we tried out for that team and ended up going down to getting sent down to Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Midway through that year, I got called up to the Fighting Saints, and I never went back to the minors. And that was the year, I think, fellas, in 77 was when my brother Jeff and Steve made the movie Slapshot with Paul Newman.
There you go. Yeah, we got some. So that was a real line for real.
It was a real line for real. You know, and going to the Slapshot movie, we playing down in Johnstown, we had a guy on our team. His name was Ned Dowd, and his sister Susan was a writer producer out in L.A. And she was writing on the bus trips up and down the East Coast. And as we would play and as we would do things, she was kind of writing the script for the movie. So that's how that all came about for how the movie Slapshot got going.
Well, I can tell you this. That's a first for everybody.
Yeah.
Because, Slapshot, historic movie. And to see the Carlson brothers tape up with the aluminum foil on their fingers, that was something else.
Yeah. Denny, I wish I had $1 for every time someone asked me if I was in the movie, because I'd be sitting pretty good right now financially.
Yes.
So
Now we're at Slapshot. What's
so now
next?
We're at Slapshot, and then after playing with the Fighting Saints, they had all kinds of financial issues back in the mid to late 70s. I ended up getting traded from to the New England Whalers back in the late 70s, and I had the great fortune of playing with Gordie Howe and his two boys for 3.5 years.
Awesome.
And then in February, Lou Nanny, who was the GM for the North Stars, traded me from New England to the North Stars, and I ended up playing there for 4.5, 5 years.
Yep.
And then went to the Stanley Cup Finals in '81, and then in '84 in '82 I got traded from the North Stars to the St. Louis Blues, and I played 2 years in St. Louis.
Yep. So let me ask you, what was your greatest game offensively, defensively, and your best fight?
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
One of the highlights is, of course, Denny and Seth, has always been, you're a Minnesota kid and you get a chance to play with the North Stars. And then going to the Stanley Cup Finals, the way that the crowds reacted to it, we ended up playing Boston in the first round, and I was involved in the game in '81, where we set the penalty record in the Boston Gardens.
406 minutes.
Quick story on that one. So Glenn is our coach, and the coaching staff, Glenn Sonmor, Murray Oliver, JP Parisi, they kind of figured we might play Boston in the first round, because back in that day, it was 1 played 16, 2 played 15, so on and so forth. So they were 8, we were 9. So Glenn gets this idea that we're playing in Boston, and the Boston Bruins had beaten the North Stars since their inception. I think the North Stars are 35 and 6 or something in the Boston Gardens. So
they beat us up.
Yeah, so the North Stars had never won in the Boston Gardens. So Glenn gets a hold of Louis. I think Louis was in Vancouver the night before or the morning of, and said, "Louis, you may be getting a call from the league president." He goes, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, we're going to make a stand tonight against the Bruins, and it's probably not going to end very well, but you might be getting a call from the commissioner on what's going to happen." And Glenn says, Louis said, "Well, do what you need to do." So that night, Glenn said, "You know what? If someone challenges you or wants to get into it with you, we got to meet the challenge." And of course, that's when we set all the penalty minutes. And sure enough, Louis did get the call the next day and said we were an embarrassment to the league. And then we ended up playing them in the playoffs, and we swept them in. It was a best out of 5 first round, and we swept them in 3. Beat them twice in the Gardens, and came back to Minnesota and could have probably sold 40,000 tickets that night.
Yeah, I remember it well. I remember when they dropped the puck. Bobby Smith was the center.
Correct.
He dropped his gloves. He'd never been in a fight.
Correct.
And that was the melee was on.
Yep.
It was awesome.
Yep. And I think the game ended with we had 7 guys on the bench and they maybe had 8 or whatever.
Yes.
The goalies are getting into it. But again, to Glenn's point, I mean, it meant something, because now the Bruins knew that, you know what, we're not going to take any more crap. You know what?
That's right.
And you know what? We had a tough team. We had myself, we had Brad Maxo, we had Freddie Barrett, we had Al McAdam, we had Dino, who, could stir things up, and we had Greg Smith, and we had a tough team.
They were awesome.
Yeah.
The best game I ever saw of the North Stars was against Edmonton, and it was hardly any hitting. It was all passing, skating, up and down the ice the entire game. Wayne Gretzky scored 2 goals, one on a breakaway, one on the power play. And I don't know if you remember this, but in the third period, Freddie Barrett, the swoop, as I used to call him, hit a slapper from the blue line, and we beat Edmonton 3-2. Best game I've ever seen of hockey, with Freddie winning the winning goal.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you talked about a highlight. Well, we were playing the first game in Garnes in the playoffs, and the score was 3-2 with about 6 or 7 minutes left, and I ended up scoring the tying goal to make it 3-3.
I remember.
And then Steve Payne ended up winning both games in overtime, so the first one and the second one.
Yep.
So,
yeah, that was historic for the North Stars.
Well, Denny, you asked me a third question, one of the, your best fight. Well, I don't know if I had a best one, but, I tell people, people have asked me over the years, how many did you win and how many did you lose? And my answer to that says, I don't know how many I won. I don't know how many I lost, but I showed up for every one of them.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
I like it.
You get challenged. You know what? You better answer the bell, because if you don't, that's just kind of a demoralizing, thing that not only does your teammates look at it, but the other team looks at it and go, okay, we got them.
Yep. All right. Awesome. Please continue. I love this story.
Well, I mean, it just, I don't know what else you want me to talk about, but I had a good career. And again, playing for your, for the North Stars was, the crowds, the arena, getting to play in the finals. Unfortunately, we ended up going up against the Islanders in '81, and
yes,
they had won it 4 years in a row, and they beat us to win it two years in a row. So they went on to win it 2 more times after that.
Yeah, I've talked about how Mike Bossy used to set up 50 pucks at the blue line before every game for practice.
Yeah, well, they had Potvin, they had Tonelli, they had Nystrom, Trotze. Yep. Billy Smith in goal, so they had goaltending. They had a kid from St. Paul, Dave. They were strong and big on defense, and they were one of those teams, guys, that they would look at you and go, we'll play any way you want to play. You want to skate and you want to shoot and you want to go up and down, we can do that. But if you want to grind it out, we'll grind it out. You want to fight, we'll fight. So kind of a nice combination.
Yeah, well, I always I talk about Al Arbor a lot. His coaching style, I wish a lot of people would take notice, because what he did, instead of having a system, he would look at his players and devise a system to bring out the best in the team.
Exactly.
And, so many coaches today have their system. Either you play it like this or your history.
Yeah.
And he was really good at that. So talk about.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well,
I was going to say.
You take a guy like Al Arbor and some of these other coaches that have had a lot of success, and you build your system around the players you have, not your system, because some guys can't play that kind of system.
Yep.
So, again, Herb Brooks had a system, and with the USA Olympic, the gold medal team, he had a system, and the kids bought into it. The Russians had a system, and when they couldn't adjust.
That's right. Why don't you talk a little bit about Glenn Sonmor, what it was like playing for him, and what kind of person was he? Just give us the lowdown.
Well, as everybody knows, Glenn was a pretty fiery guy, and he was a coach that, for the way that I played and some of the other guys that came along with me, he was my kind of a coach. He knew exactly the role that he wanted you to play, and if you played it, you're gonna stay with the team and you were gonna play. There were other guys that coming out of junior hockey up from Canada, and that they really didn't like that kind of coaching because they were coddled. And then Glenn came around and says, you know what, I'm the coach. You're going to listen to me or you're not going to play. So there was a lot of players that came down and butted heads with Glenn. But he was also a coach that, before the games, he would give us speeches. He goes, what I want to see happen, fellas, is the first 10 minutes of the game, I want to look over at their bench and they're all looking up at the clock going, oh my gosh, we got 50 more minutes of this. And but he, again, a fiery guy, and he didn't show favoritisms. And there were a lot of times when I think Louis had to come down and kind of put the fires out. But if you play and you play the way that he wanted you to play, you're going to have some success, and and sure miss them.
Yeah,
they don't come around like that very often anymore.
No,
because the players have changed.
Do you have any good stories about the Gumper?
You know what? Gumper was already gone by the time I was there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was gone. Our goaltenders were Donnie Beaupre and Gary
Mosh?
and
Oh, yeah.
So Gumper was gone. The only thing I know about Gumper was he smoked and he drank. So and didn't wear a mask. So there you go.
Okay. Well, how about some good old stories from back? A lot of people tell me today that you're washed up at 30 or 35, and I tell them back in the days when you were playing hockey, they'd be smoking and drinking beer in the room after the game.
What do you mean after the game, Denny? These guys were smoking during the game, or in between periods. So,
yes.
I'll tell you a quick story. Is our weight room. I mean, if you've ever been down at the Minnesota Wild, I think they have 3 different rooms for weights and plyomatics or whatever they call it, and they, this and that. So we had probably a 12 by 12 room at the net center. And guys would go in there in between periods and grab a 5-pound weight, and that was their ashtray. So that's the difference between the athlete now and the athlete back in the day. I mean, if you can wrap your head around it, guys smoke in between periods.
Sure has changed, hasn't it?
It's changed a little bit. I think guys drink milk in between periods now or whatever. I don't know.
Milk, water.
Yeah, exactly. All this different colored water and whatever. And I wonder what's in that stuff.
I've talked before about this, but back when you were playing, to get in shape, you would go to get in shape, where now today they work out 12 months of the year.
Well, I think the biggest thing too, Denny, with the players nowadays is it's a year-round job.
Yep. And,
way back in the day, I even asked Brad Maxwell, we used to golf, and Timmy Young, and I asked them, we've always been kind of, we were honest. I said, so Maxie, what's the most you ever made as a player? He goes, 175. Now, Brad was a guy that had 20 goals one year as a defenseman, #1 draft choice. A player, the way he played now, would come in. I mean, he'd be a $6, $7, $8 million a year player. So,
yep.
And again, playoffs. I mean, I can't believe the playoffs are still running the middle of June. We were done the end of May. Okay. And then, you put the sticks and gloves away and you grab their golf clubs. But nowadays, these players have trainers. They have personal trainers. They have nutritionists. They have, they've got all the bells and whistles to make themselves a better player.
They've got stress management staff that keep an eye on what they do during the week. And, I wanted to ask you about this, Jack, because it seems like the more data that teams compile, it seems like the less they actually do practice and things along those lines, to kind of gear up for games. It's all about rest management now. How What was that like when you were playing? How much focus was there on practice and fundamentals and everything?
Well, the practices were probably the biggest things. Now, I did not realize this, and I realized it maybe a couple 4 or 5 years ago. We had practices sometimes after training camp. Our practice would be 2.5, 3.5 hours. We never had a film session, and I don't know if it's because nobody was doing the filming, they didn't want to pay anybody to do the filming or whatever. But nowadays, I hear that they can't practice more than 2 hours at a crack. You're done at 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours. So it's all film sessions. It's all, again, the analytics, what makes a guy tick or whatever. And, the game hasn't changed. It's a 200-foot rank by 85, and there's a blue line and a red line. But they analyze players, who they are, what they are, and I think that's the biggest thing is that there's just so much into it now, whereas before it wasn't. I mean, I remember guys wouldn't pick up a stick or a puck until training camp, which was like maybe this day after Labor Day or the second week after Labor Day, and then then you'd start playing. Well, these guys they're on the ice all the time, and they're skating, and they're working out.
Yeah.
But again, when you're making $4, $5, $6 million, I mean, you back in the day, if you came into training camp out of shape, it wasn't that big of a thing. But I bet you it's now. And then, and they'll notice it. They'll notice.
Oh yeah.
It.
So for this next section here, Seth has some questions lined up from our audience that wrote in. Are you ready for that?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Yeah, and
Seth.
We got a few from the comments section that are rolling in, that I'll add to it as well. But I wanted to ask this one, although I think you already answered it. But talking about somebody who met the challenge every time you were asked to fight, was there ever a time where it could be somebody that was like 6'6", 6'7"? Was there ever a time where you were like, this might not be a good idea?
That never happened.
Good.
It never happened. Again, you show up for them. People have talked about fighting that, you never get hurt. And I can honestly say that I've hurt somebody way back in the day. I played against a kid in Phoenix, and I felt bad after that one because it was bad. But no, I never had obviously when you go, I went up against a guy in Montreal. His name was Gilles Lupien, and he was like a Zdeno Chara. I mean, if you put your arms out, he could touch both sides of the rink, 80 feet. 80 feet. And I thought, holy cow, this guy's got a long reach. So you go up against him. I did fight a guy in Pittsburgh one time, and didn't realize that his arms were probably just as long as mine. And yeah, I got tagged a couple of times by him, but get out of the penalty box and you go back at him.
Go back for seconds.
Correct. And that's what happens. And guys, that's what happens a lot of times when kids come out of college and stuff like that. And again, the game has changed because I can't believe there's guys now in the National Hockey League that get into a fight and you're fighting a guy with a shield. I want to say to them, why don't you just go put your hand in a meat grinder? That's what's going to happen. You're not going to hurt them, and you can't hurt them. Very seldom are you going to, hurt anybody that has a shield on. But I would never fight anybody with a shield. Why?
Yeah.
Good point.
The rules have changed. Is you can't take your helmet off, and that's a big fine. That's a big suspension, whatever. And it just doesn't make any sense. To that case, why don't you just take fighting out of the game right now? And that's the other thing that's always bothered me is you have a commissioner in the NHL that says, we don't want fighting in the game. Well, then take it out of the game then.
Yeah.
Take it out. You can. The snap of your finger. We're done. But owners don't want it. It brings fans in. Everybody knows it. You get a guy like Marcus Foligno, or you get some other guys. And Marcus is a great hockey player, and I love the way that kid plays. And they love when he gets into it with somebody. They're all standing, they're all cheering, and it's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah, super. When he leaves his feet to punch somebody, that's when all the social media accounts go crazy.
I know. I hear you.
We got a couple. I'm going to combine all of these into one because they all kind of go down the same path.
All right.
We have a handful of questions asking about kind of characteristics or qualities that make for an ideal captain. You see in the NHL today, you got captains of all sorts, some that are more outspoken, some that kind of lead by example. And so we've got listeners that are wondering what you think are the most essential qualities for a captain, and kind of to flip off of that, if you need to have more of a tough guy type leader as opposed to somebody who more kind of quietly leads by example. Great question.
I mean, I've often wondered that myself about some of the captains that and I'm not going to bash anybody from the Wild, but some of the captains that they've had. Do you lead by example? I don't know that. I mean, I've had some great captains. One of them was a guy that I had with the New England Whalers. His name was Ricky Lee, kind of a short, stocky defenseman, but he was not afraid to tell you to get off your ass. You're not playing like you should. Are they going to have bad games? Of course they are. But 90% of the time they're going to play well. I had another great captain with the North Stars by the name of Craig Hartsburg. And Hartsy was a guy that had just a ton of talent. Kurt Giles was a good captain. Did they lead by example? Yeah, but they were not afraid to mention to somebody, or you don't even have to point somebody out or point your finger at them. Because if you're real honest with yourself as a player and the captain says something, he's probably pointing at you. He's not going to call you out, but I like the fact, though, Seth, that you have one of your tougher players is your captain, because he's going to lead by example. Is he going to get you 30 goals? No. Is he going to get you 70 assists? No. But he's going to go through the wall. He's going to fall down, and he's going to block a shot, take it in the face, whatever, and that's your captain. Tell you a quick story. I'm by leading it by example. Again, I think I mentioned earlier that I played with Gordie Howe. So I'm sitting on the bench one night, we're playing, and this guy's 46 years old. Doesn't wear a helmet. He's 46 years old. Now think about that at 46. Okay. Puck goes out to the point to the defenseman. He slides and blocks the shot. I'm 25 on the bench. I'm 25 years old, and I'm looking at a guy like that going, well, if a 46-year-old guy can do it, I'm 25, I better do it.
Yeah.
But again, you get some of these captains that you have, and, I don't think you lead by example. I think you lead by telling people that, we're not playing as well. Why do you think you have team meetings or team, no coaches, no media, whatever, because you're not doing very well.
Yeah.
But again, you got to look at yourself, and you're getting paid an awful lot of money, and to take nights off. Yeah, you're going to have bad nights, but you don't take it off.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's kind of more about setting the standard and enforcing the standard and
Correct.
Making sure that everybody is living up to that standard that you set. And like you said, you're going to have nights where things don't go right, but the thing that kind of frustrates people is when it just looks like the guys are just kind of out of it.
Well, we had a bunch of guys back with the North Stars that, I look at the players now, and I never see anybody pat each other on the back, high five coming off the ice. Every shift, they scan the bench, and no one's chirping, no one's talking, no one. They're just sitting there, and they all look up at the clock will stop, and they're all looking up at the scoreboard to see the replay. Nobody. I mean, I just think there's not a compassion for each other, and that's what you're going to need to have to win a Stanley Cup. If you look at the Florida Panthers, they all talked about being a family, being tight. It's not like, well, boy, we lost 6-3. Hey, could you go change that assist because I got the assist on the third goal? No, it doesn't. It happened one time.
Yeah.
We were up in Edmonton, and I think we were and it was Bobby Smith and Dino Cicerelli, and Glenn was coaching. We were down 4-1 after the first period, and I think they outshot us 85-3 or something. And Bobby wanted Dino to go over to the scorer's table and said, hey, on the one goal that we got, to change the assist because Bobby got it. And Glenn got a hold of that one. And you wanted to see the sparks fly? Holy cow. And it was in front of everybody. You selfish blah, 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 beep, blah, bleep, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
It's sometimes they worry about stats, but it's got to be, your goalie makes it. I mean, that's why I like Marc-Andre Fleury. Guy will block a shot or make a save, or defenseman will do something, and he pats the guy in the back. I look at that stuff, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's like it's picking up one of your brothers when they do something to help you out.
Correct.
You're right. You're right on. Though you see that from a few teams, but it's not widespread. It's not widespread in today's NHL.
No, and you know what? It's got nothing to do with your talent. It's got nothing to do with your skills. It's all in your head that I'm going to go through the wall for my goalie. I'm not going to let him score. I'm not, whatever I have to do, I'm going to do it.
Awesome. We're going to go a little further back. This is Brian's question. He wants to know who the three best players you played with or against in high school were. He also, he says, I know Virginia had Dave Jolson, who graduated in 75. But anybody that really stood out from your high school days?
Let's see. Three players that were, my brother Steve, my brother Jeff, and myself were the three best. No. There were some good players from northern Minnesota. I mean, there was, again, one of the guys that that ended up being with the North Stars with Pete Lepresti was from Eveleth. He was a goaltender. Great player, great person. I played against the Michelettis out of Hibbing. I played against Joe. Joe's the same age as I am, and I played against Joe. We had the Perpiches are from Hibbing. I had a good fortune playing with John in the minor leagues. But there was all kinds of players from International Falls and Grand Rapids, and to go back that far, Seth and Denny, to name-wise, back in the day when they played, you didn't know, like, holy cow, this kid is good, and you just played.
Yeah. Just looking at a couple of others.
Gary Sargent out of Bemidji.
Okay.
Yes.
Sargent's a good player.
One that I had. Do you think it would be more difficult for today's players to play back in like your North Stars days, or for somebody from that time period to play today?
Well, I think that's a great question. Could the player now play back in that day? I think they could. But again, what would have to happen, though, Seth, is they'd have to take the shield off and they'd have to take a helmet off. Okay, now all of a sudden, you're more susceptible to, you might break your nose, you might lose a couple teeth. I mean, I look at these players now and they smile. I thought, where the hell did they get those teeth from?
Full teeth.
I mean, they're beautiful. They're shiny. They're white. I'm thinking, what the heck? I think the player back then playing now would have again, it's a year-round sport. conditioning, it's health, it's eating, it's, we used to go, we'd have a practice at the Met Center, and there was an old place over it was called Eddie Webster's. And we would, as a team, we'd get done with practice. Denny, you probably know that place.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we're going to go have lunch at Eddie Webster's, and there'd be 18 guys. Well, 15 would show up. Okay, we'd have lunch there, we'd have a few drinks, and geez, then you look at your watch and you go, oh my gosh, it's happy hour. Now it's 4 to 6. Okay, same 15, 16 guys are still there. I don't think you get that anymore. I think guys hang around, but I don't think there's that. Let's all go out and especially on the road. I don't know what it's like on the road with the NHL now, but I think the group back in the day was more tight and more close.
I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
I got one question for you, and this comes from Bob. He says, tough as nail leaders. How would you solve the perpetual passengers that don't play anymore? And this is what I want to say. Have you ever played with a hockey player who had no shots, no blocks, no hits for an entire game?
Of course. Yep. I think back in the day, Denny, I think not a rap on European players, because there were some pretty good European players that came over and played, and they were who was the kid from the Colorado Avalanche back in the day? He was their captain. I mean, tough as nails. But anyway, we'll think of him. But I think the European player had a hard time playing in my day because of the way they were playing. It was all skills over there. Then they came to the National Hockey League, and it was a dump and chase. You could interfere with them. You could, players would pass the puck, and you could count to 10, and you still could hit them, against the boards. They had a hard time playing because they weren't used to that type of playing. Nowadays, it's all about skills. Back when I played, I hate to say it that way, but back in the day, we had players that were, teams always went with who won the Stanley Cup. So back in my day, the Philadelphia Flyers won it 2 years in a row. And how did they win the cup? They intimidated you. So all the teams in the NHL, we're going to get guys that can stand up to being intimidated. And then you get the Islanders. You can play any way you want. Then the Edmonton Oilers won it with all skill. So if you look at the NHL draft, and I watched the draft this year, and these kids, I don't think one kid owned a razor because they don't have any hair, facial. And you look at some of the kids were big, but they were, some were 5'9", 165 or 5'10", 170. You know what? Players back then, they didn't want small players. They wanted the big 6 foot, 200, 6'2", 210, 215. They wanted the bigger players. Now you can get by with skills, and that's the way they want the game to be played now, with skilled players, and that's fine. I mean, I enjoy watching. There's some really good skilled players in this league, and one that comes to mind is that Cale Makar from the Avalanche. Can that kid play? Quinn Hughes from Vancouver. They can play. And the Wild have some very skilled players as well. If Spurgeon can stay healthy, he's in that same category. He's a good player.
Yes, he is. I like him a lot.
Yeah. We got a couple of guesses as to who were you guys talking about? Forsberg?
Yes, that's it. Peter Forsberg. Yes, absolutely.
Good work. Good work by the comment section.
Yeah.
John wants to know, he's got a couple of questions here. Did you enjoy playing the Broad Street Bullies?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you why. I knew I was going to play a lot. I mean, when you go from, I was a fourth line left winger. and I played alongside most of my career with Tommy Younghands and Mike Polich. Both Minnesota kids. But you could always know the games that you were going to play a lot. I mean, I was fourth line. I was probably sometimes going out every other shift. The Broad Street Bullies, the Boston Bruins, some of these other teams that you went up against. Chicago Blackhawks. You knew you were going to play a lot.
John also wants to know if you ever fought Tiger Williams.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the reasons, I don't know if hockey fans out there remember this, but I was playing with the New England Whalers, and there was a game I don't know if it was in Boston or if it was in Minnesota, but John Wensing from the Bruins challenged the bench. And everybody, I mean, if you want to go on Google, you can Google it, and he challenges the bench, and nobody came off the bench. Now, had I been there, my gloves and sticks would have never left the bench. Okay, but that's the way. I mean, if you get challenged, and guess who was the coach? Glenn Sonmor. I think after that, the next year, they traded for me. But so one of the games, I think the second game I played with the North Stars, I played against Tiger Williams, and I'm sure he knew who I was, and I knew who he was, and I don't think he. Again, I don't brag a lot about people that I got in a tussle with, but I don't think he wanted to. I challenged him about 7 or 8 times before he finally said, I guess I got to do this. and it wasn't good for him.
I love it. You got any good stories about Lou?
No, I don't. I mean, again, Louis was a great general manager that he allowed his coaches, and we had a great set of coaches with Murray Oliver, Lou Nanny, and JP Parisi, that he let these guys do what they did best. And you know what? We started winning games, and we got to the Stanley Cup Finals, and he kind of let, I'm sure he had to step in sometimes to, I never went to Louis because I had a gripe, but I know there were some players that did have a gripe. I'll tell you a quick story about Louis that I had found out. So there was a player back in the day, his name was Glenn Sharpley. Seth, you wouldn't know, but Denny, you might know who he is.
Oh, yeah.
He was a number 1 draft choice out of Toronto. And he came down, and of course, when you're number 1 draft choice, you better get 35, 40, 50 goals. Well, he wasn't playing very well. And Glenn told me this story. And Sharpley's agent goes into town. Now, Glenn was a first line. Sharpley was a first line. Then he went to second. Then he was playing third line. Now he's on the fourth line. He's not on the power play. He's not killing. He's not doing anything. So his agent goes into Louis and says, Lou, Glenn Sharpley's not. He's not playing. He's not. He's not getting ice time. We think that it might be a good time that you move him. Now I think this agent was going to say, had hoped that Louis was going to say, whoa, wait a minute now. I'll go talk to the coaches. You know what Louis' answer was? He'll be gone by the end of the day. He goes, I'll trade him by the end of today. And he was traded by the end of the day.
Awesome. That's a good story.
Either play him or trade him. He goes, he'll be gone by the end of the day. So there you go. If you don't want to play, if you're coming in to threaten the GM to trade your player, you're going to get traded.
Yeah, you're not going to. You're not going to win that battle.
You're not going to win that battle.
Jack, we got a couple questions from one of your reffing proteges from Lakeville, asking about how bummed were you that you couldn't be in Slapshot because you're in the playoffs with the Oilers?
Yeah, I was a little bit bummed, and I'll tell you the story there. They had I was with the Fighting Saints at the time, and the team had folded, and I ended up going back home to northern Minnesota and was staying with my mom and dad, waiting for my agent to find out or to find me a place to play. So my brother Jeff calls me, and I now I'm up there for a week a week and a half. My brother Jeff calls and says, Jack, they're doing this movie in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and they want you to be in it. I said, oh, okay. I said, Jeff, a couple questions. Yeah, go ahead. I said, well, how much money am I going to be making? I don't know. I said, Jeff, how long am I going to be there? He goes, I have no idea. I said, Jeff, I'm not going to jump on an airplane, go to Johnstown, and not have any particulars. He goes, well, I'll have one of the producers get a hold of you. I said, okay, that's fine. So, we get off the phone. Nothing happens for 3 or 4 days. Edmonton calls and says, Jack, we got 9 games left in the season. We got the playoffs. We want you to come up here. I said, so when do you want me? He goes, we play tomorrow night. Can you be up here tomorrow night? I says, I'll be there. So, and then of course, then I go play the game. Producer calls me the next day and goes, well, you didn't sign a contract. I says, no, but I shook hands and that's golden. I mean, that's just like signing the contract. He goes, okay, we'll get somebody else to play your part. And the fella that they got was from St. Paul. His name is Dave Hansen. I thought he did a fabulous job. I couldn't be more happy the role that these guys played. And I got asked quite a bit, was I in the movie? I said, no, I wasn't. But, I ended up having a pretty good career after that. And, they ended up, doing pretty good for themselves as well.
Absolutely. On the angle of officiating, is there any rule that exists in the NHL today that you'd like to see changed?
Yeah, there's one in particular. You know what? I was taught that when the referee blows the whistle, that play stops. What I don't like is all this stuff after the whistle. Okay, this pushing, this shoving, the face washing. I mean, the other one is, when you I was a USA Hockey. I tell this story. So when I got done playing, probably sitting around I wasn't sitting, I was working, but I was. I got into hockey refereeing, and people go, "You're a referee?" I said, "Yeah." I never realized that rule book is almost 2 inches thick. I said, there's that many rules in hockey? I never knew that. But, when you extend your arms, that's a cross check. And I think the National Hockey League is barking up a tree here. One of these days, there's going to be a player that's going to get cross-checked, and he's going to go face front into the boards, and then we're going to have a Jack Jablonski again. You got to call that. When somebody blows the whistle, that means play stops. You cannot have this stuff after the whistle all the time. One, you got a face shield on. You know what? And if you want to be a tough guy, okay, then do something about it. But this idea of pushing and shoving, glove in the face, grabbing somebody, pushing, I mean, people don't like that. Nothing's going to happen. And
good point.
No calls.
Yeah. We got a couple more. Trav wants to know what your perfect Sunday consists of.
Ooh, now we're back then. No, I'm dealing with a couple hip surgeries in the last year that have been pretty serious. So my perfect Sunday is, back in the day, golfing with my buddies. I did a lot of rollerblading, back in the day. And if you guys can believe this, I've got a little couple of vegetable garden plots over at a church that I plant all kinds of vegetables, and that's my therapeutic, putting things in the ground and watching them grow. And it's funny because Brad Maxwell, God rest his soul, that he passed away last September, but him and I, two pretty tough guys, players. We would get on the phone or go see each other and go, hey, Brad, how's your potatoes growing? What, hey, I got all kinds of bugs on my potato plants, and oh my God. And we would just sit and laugh about, talking about, those types of things.
Awesome. I want to, let me get to these because I want to talk about the Alumni Association too. Ron wants to know how your brother Steve is doing.
Is something wrong with him?
I'm sure he's just curious.
I'll tell you, my brother Steve had throat cancer. All right. So back about 6 years ago, I had throat cancer. Okay. I went through radiation and I went through chemotherapy and had to have a feeding tube put in. But I kept it to myself. Okay. My wife, Jerry, and I dealt with it and we went through the whole treatment and everything. And it was pretty nasty. So the day I found out that I was on a good path, my brother Jeff gets throat cancer. Same throat cancer. So now we're thinking about, okay, living on the Iron Range, you've got all the iron ore, soot, and whatever, asbestos. Okay, is that something? So he goes through the same thing that I did. So then a 3 years ago, we're up, they built a brand new arena, convention center up in Virginia, Minnesota, and they're hanging our jerseys up there. And my brother Steve has this lump on his neck. I said, what do you got there? He goes, well, I've had this. I said, how long have you had that? He says, about 11 years. I says, you better go get that checked. Okay. My brother Steve gets throat cancer. Okay.
Oh,
both my brother Jeff and Steve kept it quiet. I mean, this is just something we dealt with. He's my brother, but he made it a point to let the whole world know that he had throat cancer. He's fine. He's okay.
Wow.
That's good to hear.
But all three brothers, 1 year apart, all had the same throat cancer.
Wow.
Wow. That's hereditary.
Well, it might be, but again, no. I mean, the doctors couldn't say why if you do the research on people with throat cancer, they really don't know why you get it.
Huh. Well, for the last section of the show, I would like your assessment on the Minnesota Wild, if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay.
Some of it's good. I mean, they've got some really, really good players. And they've got the Eriksson Ek kid. They got Boldy, Kaprizov, obviously. Can they win the Stanley Cup right now? If you look at the Stanley Cup, it's a grind.
Yeah,
it's a grind. And you find out later on that Draisaitl and McDavid were playing with some injuries. You're going to have your minor league system is going to have to be pretty big and pretty strong. But it's you got to win 16 games, and you don't know how many. I mean, you have to win 16. You might play 30. But you have to have a system and goaltending. That's the biggest thing is your goaltending. Now, I don't know if they're going to keep the goaltender. I mean, I know Fleury, but I don't know what they're going to do with their number one goalie. Is the kid from is it Jespert? Is he ready to play? I think he's ready to play.
Absolutely.
I think the Wild, Denny, I heard you talking about the kid from Denver that was a great draft. I mean, to get that kid, you score 56, points in college. It's a pretty good season. And he might be ready. But again, you've got some guys on the backside that I don't know if they can stand the grind, because you're going to get, as we all see it and we all know, every time you touch the puck in the playoffs, you're getting hit. And it's all 20 guys on the team. So some guys can get through it during the season because they don't play that way. But again, you make the playoffs, it's a grind. And they've got some people in place. I don't know their minor league system that well, but they've got to get again, your big players have to play big during the season to get in, and then any team that's in the playoffs, it's your third and fourth lines that's going to win you the Stanley Cup.
Absolutely.
Because
4 lines deep.
Because you can see when Draisaitl and McDavid don't score, they don't win.
Yep.
That's a good assessment. Any other stories you want to talk about? Back in your high school day.
No, not on there,
Oh, well, we'll talk after the show, of course.
Denny. But you know, I mean, what I do want to say though is back in we had some really, really good teams, and we had some really, really good players. Again, Bobby Smith, Dino Ciccarelli, Neil Broughton, Al McAdam, Hartsburg, Maxey, Timmy Young,
Steve Payne.
I mean, we had a big team. We had after the Boston game, we finally realized that, you know what, we're not going to take any more, Freddie Barrett, Kurt Giles. We had some great players, Polish Younghands. We had some good players, and it was fun to play with them. And, you look back and, did we win the Stanley Cup? No, but, you got there. And, that's a pretty good memory.
It's an awesome memory, actually.
Yeah.
I really miss the North Stars. When I was a kid, I couldn't afford to go to the game, so I would sell Secord Sucks buttons for every game, pay for my ticket to get in.
Yeah.
Those were quite the days back then.
But see the difference, and again, Denny, to your point about the Secord thing, there were many, many times I look at the Wild play, and, you watch half a game and they got 10 shots on goal for half a game. And there were many times that I would say to Dino, and Dino was a shit disturber, and I'm not, and he knew it.
Yep.
I said, Dino, we're not doing anything. I said, go get something started. And I said, you know what? You go start it, and I'll try to finish it. And, he'd go out there and he'd spear Secord, or he'd, somebody's face and that. And guess what? Now all of a sudden the crowd's into it. And so is everybody else on the bench.
Yeah, I miss those days. Dino and Broughton.
Yep.
Painter. McAdam.
And Brad Palmer. There were some good players that played.
Absolutely. Nell Shaver calling the game. Doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, rest in peace. He was just he got, that's why the Shaver press box is named what it is. And, he was one of the best in the game. One of the best.
Absolutely. You got anything, Seth?
That's pretty much
Any more questions?
Pretty much it, other than wanted to spend a little time talking about the Alumni Association as we kind of wrap up.
Yeah.
So kind of save that for last. So just tell us a little bit, Jack, about what the Alumni Association does, some of the events that you guys are a part of, and just kind of what you guys do.
Sure. Again, we had the Alumni Association was started up, and Tom Reed was our first president, and then Brad Maxwell took over. And then Brad passed away, and now I'm the president of the Alumni Association. And what we wanted to do is give back over the years back to the community. And there was a couple of things. We did some things for cancer. We ended up having a great idea that, let's do a golf tournament, raise money for that. We had games that we would play. We'd go into an arena where they would raise money for their youth hockey programs, and we get a little chunk of money to put into our Alumni Association. And we came up with the idea of putting, and a lot of people don't realize this, but put AEDs in hockey arenas. You've got players, men's leagues, women leagues. You've got youth hockey. You've got where there are not AEDs in all arenas across the state of Minnesota. So we were raising money and giving AEDs to arenas. And, just on a happy note, I believe there's been 4 or 5 instances around the state of Minnesota where they happen to have an AED that the Alumni Association donated, and it saved somebody's life.
Awesome.
And, so we used to do games. We don't do anymore because what's been difficult for us is getting guys to come out and do those games. A lot of guys are in their 60s, some are in their 70s to play into these games. The alumni has unfortunately kind of deteriorated a little bit because it's people. Guys have families, guys have kids in hockey, guys have kids in other sports. We get that, but it's just hard to get guys together to come together and do these events. So, but we still have a real strong alumni that join every year, but we're always looking to help out wherever we can.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, I want to announce this again. July 28th, which is the last Sunday in July, we are going to have a meet and greet with former Minnesota North Stars. And hopefully Jack is included there if his hips can handle it. And we're also working on getting the Minnesota Women's Professional Hockey Championship. We're going to get the girls in for one big show. We're going to have 3 different podcast teams, all live for a couple hours where you can get your pictures taken with them, shoot the shit, and have a beer. And on that note, I just want to say thank you, Jack. This was an awesome interview. It really was. I enjoyed it.
Seth, thanks a lot. It's been my pleasure, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jack. You were so gracious with your time here today. This was a lot of fun, and a lot of the listeners thank you for hopping on here with us today as well.
Anytime, fellas. You know that.
All right. Thanks, Jack.
All right,
Thanks,
bud. Have
Jack.
a good day, guys. Thanks.
All right. Well,
What do you think, Denny?
I think it went well.
Yes, that's
Being our very first interview, I think it went really well. Let's ask the subscribers. What did you think? What can we do better?
Steven says best locked on ever.
Oh, awesome.
Let us know in the comments if you have any thoughts on how things went here today. Just drop them in the comments. But I think that's a pretty darn good way to end the Sunday show.
Absolutely.
I
was going to say, I want to thank everybody for coming on the show. And I just wanted to say that, Lockdown Wild just got over 2,000 views, which is another historic moment. Our show is moving up the ladder. And I'm working on a few things I can't talk about yet because I don't have it locked in. But we will have, I don't know, 5 or 6 big-time guests from the East Coast and from Canada coming on. You'll get to look forward to, and we want to make this a mainstay for your Sunday afternoon, much like when Sid Hartman had his 10 o'clock show on the radio. We want to make this the 12 o'clock for everybody to tune in.
Absolutely.
With that, that's all I got for today.
Hit that like button, everybody. We've got draft recap for you tomorrow. Alex and I will kind of set the scene for free agency, and I probably will have one more episode that I'll get ironed out for you for your Monday, because 4th of July is going to be here before you know it, and so we'll get the scene started because I know people are going to be traveling, so we'll give you plenty to listen to in the car. But thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we will catch you on tomorrow's episode of Locked on Wild.